keep going to people for prayer. Just keep at it. We don't stop. When we're struggling with something or dealing with something, you go to prayer time and time again to someone about the same thing. You know, and I shared this last week. For these panic attacks, I've gotten prayer well over 100 times with somebody laying their hands on me, and yet I still continue on with the panic attack. I continue on with the anxiety. But I did find the peace of God in the midst of it. And I found things He was teaching me and showing me. So I just press on. It doesn't matter what the results were that I saw, I just press on. And I have a quick caveat from last week, is that I had said something along the lines of, like, if you're struggling with any of these things, I just want you to know it's okay. And I was saying it's okay in the sense that you're not second class. You're still a beloved of the Father if you've put your faith in Jesus Christ. These things don't make you second class. But I want to just clarify, suicidal thoughts, if you are actually thinking out how you're going to take your life, you need to tell somebody. Okay, that one, these other things, yes, we struggle with. Sometimes we bury them too long. You do need to share them. But if you're having any of that, you need to talk to someone right away. Okay, you need to share it and get it off your chest. If you recall the 2 times that I dealt with those suicidal thoughts, the first time within a half hour, I told somebody, and the next time within, it was about a half hour, I told somebody. So I just realized this is not okay, and I need help. I need help. Everything in you doesn't want to tell somebody. But that's the way God has designed us, is that we need each other. So sometimes, my pride, and it comes as false humility, thinks between me and God, I should get it figured out, right? Because He's God, and between me and Him. But He actually designed the body to be a part of Him. And so if we refuse to reach out and ask for help, we're refusing part of Jesus. Okay? So if you're just thinking it's going to be some light from heaven and He's going to talk directly to you, sometimes He actually designed that Jesus is inside of Lori. And I need to go to Lori, and she's going to have that piece of advice. That is from the heart of God that I need. Does that make sense? And so that's part of humbling ourselves and recognizing I can't do it on just my own in Jesus, because He gave us the body for a reason. Right? None of these are in my notes. I'm going to have those 15 minutes, by golly. All right. Just jump right into it. So last week we just shared a lot of verses that I've been using to help combat the lies, the unworthiness that I was feeling, the pressures that I was feeling. And again, lots of times I felt like there was no trigger to any of my panic attacks. And even during them, I didn't feel any stress or anxiety or fear necessarily, but I was still having a panic attack. Can't really explain it. It was weird. I've learned there were things deep in my subconscious that I didn't even realize. In fact, this last week, and I'll get to that, but God began to show me some of those things, and I felt a greater degree of pressure lift. And every time there's a new layer, I'm just like, God, there's a lot wrong with this. But I mean, for me, I'm like, God, there's a lot wrong with me. Like, you are perfect, I am not. And it's just like layer after layer. It's just like, can't I be all the way healed up yet? And it's like, no, there's still things that are not lining up with the Spirit that He has to remind me of. But these are things to help us combat hard times. We made reference to it last week. 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10. So to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of revelation, this is Paul talking. So he's saying, I've had these great revelations. He's walked in the power of God, right? He's raised the dead. But he says, a thorn was given in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. Scholars, in studying, and as much as I've studied on this, we do not know what the thorn in the flesh was. We don't know. Some people say he had a physical ailment. Okay, so we truly don't know what it was. And anybody who says they know what it is, I'm sorry, it's just speculation. I don't think we can know exactly. But a lot of scholars believe that the thorn in his flesh was the almost the ridiculous amount of persecution that he got. Where the other apostles, they got persecuted some, but Paul seemed to have bad luck. Like everywhere he went, Yeah, he raised the dead. Yeah, he did some good things. But it's like every city wanted to kill him. Everywhere he went, he's been beaten with rods. He's been whipped 4 times. He gets shipwrecked twice. And it's like everywhere he goes. And so some scholars believe, because if you connect that down to the end there, about weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, is that the thorn in his flesh was just kind of like, God, what the heck? Everywhere I go, the other apostles, they got good luck. Like, they didn't have to get beaten with rods. But every city I go into, I'm getting beaten. Every city I go, I'm getting thrown in jail for a year. It's like, so some believe, because of that connection, that that's actually the thorn in his flesh that he was talking about. Again, we can't know for sure. I like to lean towards that one. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. And I love this because it's the same kind of response with Job. God does not answer Paul on why it's there, how it got there, there's some open door. He doesn't answer any of it. He gives fresh words of life that are just for Paul. It's not to be applied to every single person. Even though I think this one we can apply, but sometimes God speaks individual things to us that are just for us. But in this case, the Lord just said to him, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. That was God's answer. He didn't explain why it's there. He didn't explain why it's not leaving. He just said, my grace is enough for you. And that was enough for Paul. That was his answer. And he said, okay, that's okay. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Remember last week we looked at the verse that said, when I'm given over to death for the sake of Jesus, it's so that he can manifest himself through me. So when we're weak, when we're going through a trial, and that's something that will help us go through trials or difficulties, is changing our perspective and realizing this is an opportunity for Jesus to shine through me. This is a good thing. I don't pray for trials to happen to me, but our stance, and I've learned this, it took a while, but I've learned it, as soon as trials come, I begin rejoicing right away. I don't say, keep it coming, I'll take some more. No, but I start rejoicing in the midst of a trial. Because I know when I'm feeling weak and overwhelmed and I can't do it on my own, that's a good thing. That's Gospel 101. That I can't do it on my own. And it's an opportunity for Jesus to shine through me. So when I feel overwhelmed, I can't handle it, I can't do it, I'm unworthy, all these things, this is a good opportunity for me to bow the knee and to let God shine through. Okay? Because we can't do it on our own. And so we rejoice that we're weak. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content. I'm content, at peace. I'm at peace. With what? With weaknesses, with insults, with hardships, with persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So I'm at peace with whatever trials are going on. Philippians 3:10. That I may know him. This is, I love this verse and this cry inside of Paul. And I don't have the verses before it, but he's, just kind of going on about all he's seen in life. And this is like maybe 15, somewhere between 15 and 20 years into his ministry. So he's seen a lot of stuff. He's been through a lot of stuff. And this remained his cry after all that time, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection. Everybody here can say that. We're just like, yeah, I want to know him. And the power of his resurrection, that one's easy to say. I rarely heard people say this one. And may share his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. I rarely hear people pray that one. I hear people pray all the time. I want to know you. I want to know you. Right? We want to know him. We want his power. I want to suffer. I want to share your suffering. Becoming like you in your death. That's kind of an intense statement. So here's the perspective God was kind of showing me this week. Sometimes, and we have that verse in Hebrews that says, we have a great high priest, meaning Jesus, who can relate to us in all ways, because he suffered in every way, he was tempted in every way, he overcame. So whatever you're going through, he won't give you too much that you can't get out of it. If you're tempted, you can get out of it because he can relate to us. But really, in actuality, it's not like God's relating to my pain and suffering. When we experience pain and suffering, we are relating to just a fraction of the pain and suffering he went through. And we went over this last week. The greatest amount of pain or suffering that any human has been through, no one will ever go through what Jesus went through on the cross. It won't happen. The physical pain was intense. There are more physical, painful things in this life, I think, that people have been through, and that's fine. But him who knew no sin, becoming sin, taking on the weight of the world on his shoulders, taking on the wrath of God that was due to us, God turning his back on him and saying, God, have you forsaken me? He who was God, and the Father forsakes him. What he went through and the amount of guilt and shame he felt for something he didn't do. He never did any of those sins, but he took on every single one. So, what's happening is that when we're suffering, we're just getting a tiny taste of what our Savior went through. Just a tiny taste. It's not even close. When I went on this solo backpacking trip, and I shared this last week, I felt unworthy, I felt useless as a husband and father because, well, I kind of was. I was just in bed constantly shaking, having panic attacks for 2 weeks straight, and I felt like God wanted me to go backpacking in the hills, and I was like, I will not ask that, because I already felt useless to my wife and kids and to the church. I was just like, I can't do anything. I'm just broken. I can't get out of bed. And my wife asked me one night when I was just frustrated, and I told her, I said, I'm sick of talking about myself. I said, I'm just sick of all this introversion. I'm just fed up. I just want to love God and love others. That's what I want to do. And I'm sick of trying to fix this. Even though I knew I needed to address it. Even though I knew I need to look inward because something's wrong. But I was like, I'm just sick of it. I'm fed up. I just want to love God and love others. That's all. And she just said to me, pack up tomorrow and go into the hills, go backpacking. For 5 days, she said. I ended up going for 4. I've never solo backpacked. It was a godsend. It was glorious. I went over them mountains way back to, almost got to Paiute Peak. And there wasn't a soul there for 4 days, but there were plenty of cougar tracks. I was a little concerned about those. And bear poop all over this meadow. It was like, you could see all the, you could see a spot where they were just like rolling around or something, because all this stuff was just flat, and everywhere else was fine, and there was like bear poop everywhere. I was like poking it, I was like, that's kind of fresh, whatever. I had Sarah to protect me. But it was wonderful, and I just want to share with you some of the things that God was speaking to me there and sharing with me that really helped me to get through. But I knew there was clearly things in my subconscious that I couldn't recognize, because within an hour of hiking, before I'm even out of sight of the valley, I can't explain it any other way, I felt everything that was wrong here, and the pressure I was feeling, and just this stuff is weird. It doesn't make any sense to me. But I felt pressure. Everything fell off inside of me for months now. And within an hour of hiking, I felt it lift, like in a second. And I was just like, it's gone. It's gone. I was like, that's cool. So, and I had about an hour left before I got to the valley. I literally felt it return. That was after 4 days of having none of it. And so I just realized, like, okay, God, there's something up here. There's some kind of pressure that I'm not recognizing that I need to deal with. I need to go deeper. But on this trip, I just recognized, like, I just kept thanking him every day. I get to share a little bit of suffering. I get to feel a little bit what it was like to suffer. Not even close to what you experienced, but I get to experience a little bit. Before I had, I'll get to that verse later. 1 Peter 4, 12 through 13. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. We see this a lot with believers, and I've talked about this a lot during the series with the American gospel. Please listen to last week's if you didn't hear it, about God causes all things to work together for good. And we talked about what was that good. It's that the love of Jesus can't be separated from us. It's that the knowledge of Him is inside of us. Because within that context, Paul lists that you're going through all these horrible trials. You're being led like lambs to be slaughtered. He's talking to the Romans who are being torn apart in Colosseums and being murdered. And he's saying, for you, God's causing everything to work together for good. So the good isn't the American dream. That's not the good that God's talking about. And so a lot of time as believers, because we have that concept, because we live in a great country where we have a lot of freedoms, and if you work hard here, you can make money. Way easier than most other places. That's just a fact. If you work hard, you can make money here way easier than many other places on this earth. And so because of that, sometimes we tie in the goodness of God and we relate it to our house, our car, our finishing this payment. And that has nothing to do with the goodness of God, because all that's going to burn one day. It will all be gone, and all that matters is the spiritual significance and our relationship with Jesus. But I see this all the time. A trial comes and Christians are shocked. How did that happen? How did God let this happen? And I'm not making light of it, because there's horrible things that happen. Believers lose children. Dad said it from the get-go. And when we said, I want to contend for healing, but he said, godly people and people who love the Lord die. It's just a fact. It's how it goes. And so, but I see this time and time again. People are just shocked. Like, how is this happening? How is there a trial coming? I thought I was supposed to be protected from trials. Not so. Nothing strange is happening to you. But rejoice. Rejoice. That's your mandate. That's your goal in every trial, with every pain going on. That's my mandate. I can always choose to rejoice. I can. And with Christ, I can always choose to rejoice. No matter what I'm going through, I'm at the end of myself. I don't understand why all of it's happening. I can still choose to worship the King. Always. But what are we rejoicing in? Insofar as you share Christ's sufferings. Find joy in the fact that you get to taste just a fraction of what our Savior went through. Luckily, we will never taste of what He went through, because He took our condemnation. He took our payment of sin that we owe. And the wrath that's due us, He took that. So we never have to suffer it. So we'll never come close. And He suffered it. He felt the wrath of the Father being poured out. And it needed to be poured out because sin is evil. And there had to be payment. There had to be justice. That you may also rejoice and be glad when His glory is revealed. Before I went on this trip at one point, I was just having it out with God. And it was good and healthy. I was just, being real honest with Him and stuff. It was fine. But I just told Him, I was like, God, if you're not going to baptize me in power, if we're not going to see revival, pick someone else for the job. I don't want it. I said, that's what I've sought all my life. That's what I've always cried out for. I want to see revival. I want to see people saved. I want to see people delivered. This panic and things I'm going through, I hate it, and I hate that other people are experiencing it. And if you're not going to give me power to heal, and if we're not going to see power in our midst, pick someone else for the job. I don't want it. I just kind of had it out with Him. And by the fourth day of backpacking, I quoted this verse. Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Luke 22:42. And I just started telling God, I take it back. I said, if I have to suffer and pain and push through and never see the results, if this is your will, then I'll take it. And if I had to do it, if it's your will, I want it. I don't care what it looks like. If it's your will, I want it. Because that's the only place we're going to find peace, is in His perfect will. As I went up there, this was the mandate from God. And this is the mandate from God that He told me all that time ago, and again, we all can go through different seasons. But if you recall, over 2 years ago, I know the Spirit called me into a season of desperate weeping and wailing and crying for revival like I have never experienced. I would weep, wail, groan. I felt like I was dying inside, but I know it was the Spirit leading me there. And it would just come on me for almost a year. Likewise, I know it was the Spirit who told me one time when I went to travail again, and He said, that season's over. Just rest in my joy. That's your mandate. And that's been my mandate, and I'm still trying to figure that one out. Because here's the thing. I'm really good at fasting, at praying, at desperately going after God. And that's not a bad thing. But if it's not what the Spirit's telling you to do at the moment, it can be a bad thing. Do we all understand that? There are really good things, spiritual disciplines that you can do that are actually bad. If you're doing them apart from the Spirit of God. If you're doing them to earn love, He says He's testing our motives, right? The Pharisees and Sadducees, and they were doing good things sometimes, right? They're giving to the poor, right? He's dumping all this stuff into there, and he's letting everyone see. And Jesus said, He already received His reward. He's not doing that for me. So He's doing a good thing, but Jesus said He got no reward in heaven. They're praying, they're tithing everything, and He says these are good things, but you got no reward. They're good things. It doesn't matter because I see your motive. I see your heart. I see why you're doing it for the praise of man. And so we can do things that are good and they're not in the will of God. And so God was telling me to rest, and I have a really hard time doing that. I have a really hard time not praying and travailing. I mean, within weeks of Dad passing away, I already want to fast and pray for the church. And God's just like, no, but you're supposed to be resting. You're supposed to be mourning and just relaxing right now. That's what I want you to do. I want you to just receive my presence, meditate on my love. But something inside of me is like, I can't do that because those things, praying, fasting, worshiping hours and hours with God, that is Christianity. And this is one of the revelations I had when I was up in the hills. I just went to rest. And I didn't go up there and spend hours and hours in prayer. I just kind of talked to God throughout the day. Thank you for your creation. It's awesome. But I just did what I wanted to do, which was mostly run and hike and explore. I probably put in 30 plus miles in those 4 days. And something that dawned on me on the fourth day, I wrote it down and I just said, Christianity is not something I do. It's who I am. Somehow in our brains, at times, we can think if I'm not doing X, Y, Z, I'm no longer a Christian, as if that X, Y, Z had anything to do with how you got your salvation, or how you acquired the love of God. You didn't acquire the love of God. He gave it to you freely. You humbled yourself and accepted it. That's how we acquired the love of God. And yet something in me was like, if I'm not up here praying and stuff, it's a waste of time. God was like, no. I just want you to rest. Just enjoy. Just rest. And I like to worship, so I did that an hour and a half every night because I enjoyed it. I would just sit by the fire. And sometimes I just sit and stare at the fire for like 2 hours because I enjoyed that. And I had to realize God loves me. My salvation is tied up in Him. It's not tied up in what I do. I shared this one with you last week. I'm going to share it again. I felt like God spoke this to me long ago. Don't even approach me until you believe I love you. And I've had to refresh myself with this time and time again. If I go to approach and talk to God and I'm not convinced that He loves me, I'll stop and I'll just meditate. Recognize that He loves me, and once I believe it, then I talk to Him. Ryan told me before I headed up into the mountains, and it just stuck with me, he said, revival's not your job. It's God's job. Your job is personal revival. And this is something I want to share with you guys, and something that God had me do this. So during church last week, I was going through like 6 days of straight anxiety every day in the afternoon. It would hit every day, like right about 1 o'clock. It would just hit. out of nowhere. And I was like, I don't know why it's there. Couldn't recognize why it was there. Couldn't recognize any thoughts attached to it. Nothing. But then, I think it was Sunday night, I was in bed, and suddenly I was gripped with you guys. I was gripped with what I perceived as compassion for you guys. But it turned into intense worry and intense, what can I do? God, what can I do for revival? What can I do to get you free? What can I do to do that? What can I do? And I was like stressed, like if I had hair, I'd be pulling it out type stress, right? I went out in the living room and I'm like, oh, I'm just like rolling and just pressure everywhere. I'm like, God, I don't know what to do. And he told me, release your burden from us. I said, what? I said, God, I've carried this all my life. I love the lost. I thought that's a good thing that I weep and wail for the lost. When I talk to some people about how I weep and wail for the lost, it's foreign to them. And I said, God, this is a good thing. But then, this is how he worded it. I want you to say, I am not responsible for their salvation. And it dawned on me, I was carrying the responsibility for your guys' choices. I was carrying the responsibility that if I didn't step out of the boat and go and get that person saved, then their blood is on my hand. I was carrying this responsibility as opposed to just do what the Spirit's telling you and you can't worry about the rest. But I was carrying this burden like if I don't do X, Y, Z, which God wasn't telling me to do X, Y, Z. He was telling me to rest, but if I don't do X, Y, Z, it's my fault. And the reason I'm sharing this with you, even though you might feel like that's my own personal journey, I want to share it with you because I'm going to present to you the Word of God to the best of my ability and present to you how to commune with God, how to live for God, and if you choose not to follow it, that is your own fault. It's not mine. I'm not responsible. So that's why I'm telling you that. And I'm not responsible for revival. I'm not responsible for your response. I'm not responsible for you getting free. That's not my job. My job is to do what the Spirit's telling me to do. And that's it. And I let go of the rest. And that took me 2 hours. Because I literally released one person at a time. I'd be gripped with compassion for Danielle. I'd be gripped with compassion for Sue. I would like go through one person and God would tell me to say, I'm not responsible for them. And I was like, I can't say it. I can't. And I'd say it, and then sometimes I'd cry for 5 minutes. As I just realized I was actually carrying the burden that I'm the Savior. Apparently. I'm responsible. And I was like, I'm not God. And since that time, I have felt so much more freedom. I've still had times where it's coming out of nowhere, so I'm like, God, I'm an intricate dude. I guess there's something else wrong, something else in my subconscious. But you need to help me. But it's getting better and better. Mom, would you like to share for 5 minutes? The mic's right there, unless you want to wear this.
No. Well, that's not as bad. It doesn't go across the top of your head. You're all weird.
That's right. Because of my vanity, I don't like that. Well, Joel was telling me earlier this week about something he was struggling with, and he recognized it, but he couldn't get free of it. And he was just saying, what do I do? So I just gave him a real practical thing that I feel like the Lord had showed me years ago that really helped me to get free in some areas. Multiple times I've used this. I'm currently also using this method. But, it all kind of stems around this idea that, a lot of us, we wait till we're in crisis and then we start fighting. And then when we're not feeling that pressure or that crisis, we just go upon our merry way until the next crisis comes and it's even worse. And, we were learning all this about the truth, and the truth is a sword, and we fight this battlefield in our mind, taking these thoughts captive. But if you only wait until you're in the midst of a big clash with the enemy, you are not ever going to get completely free of it. Because if you look at what goes into any battle that's successful, there is preparation for years. Even those guys you see on TV who can take anybody out, they have prepared for years, supposedly, to be able to take anybody out like that. And, sometimes we like to see the big, those people who like to see the big battle where, there's this big clash and, your guy wins. But sometimes the enemy is so entrenched that you have to lay siege. You have to cut off the supplies to the enemy. And you have to just chip away at the enemy until they retreat or until you can go in and take the enemy. And that is how it is with this battlefield of our mind. It's when you're doing well and feeling good that you need to be waging this war. You need to be taking out the sword of truth, and you need to be tearing down every lie that you recognize in your life. And you also need to cut off the supply to the enemy. He grows, his power grows over us when we sit and think about that lie, when we speak it, things we've been learning from Joel. And so what I told him to do is this area where he's feeling that he just can't let go of this lie that the enemy's told him. I said, ask the Lord to give you the truth about that statement, whatever it is. Ask the Lord to give you the truth, and then write it down on Post-it notes, put it in a note card in your car, speak it out loud multiple times a day for a month at least, and maybe longer, until you find yourself completely free from that. And if you do that, when that battle comes, that clash with the enemy, he is tired and he's hungry because you haven't been feeding him. You've been speaking the truth over that lie in your life. And so when you find something you can't get through, ask the Lord to give you a truth. And it might be a scripture, or it may be just he speaks something to you. Like maybe if you're feeling bad about yourself and you're constantly putting yourself down, sit there and ask the Lord, how do you feel about this in me, God? And listen to him and let him speak how he feels about you, what he loves about you. And then write it down and speak it over and over throughout the day. And that is a huge way that I've gotten victory over so many things in my life. And, since my past, somebody gave me, I don't even remember who, this plaque that says Psalms 112:7. She confidently trusts in the Lord. Right where every time I come in the house, I see it. Every time I walk into the kitchen, I see it. So multiple times in the day, I see that and I read that. Because when the enemy comes against me and tells me I can't do this, or you're on your own, or, you don't have a husband anymore, what are you going to do? How are you going to do this? How are you going to get taxes? I had to do them last year, but Mike was able to help a little bit. But this year, I just got the stuff, and I'm like, here I go. So I have to read that. I confidently trust in the Lord to take care of me. And I've told multiple single women when I've met with them, you are not single. You are the bride of Christ. Quit feeling like you don't have the resources of a married woman. You are the bride of Christ. And because I've said that over and over, now that I'm a single woman, I believe that. Because that's truth. And so there are lies that have been bedded in us by lies our parents have believed. And by their behavior, they've passed on to us. It's so embedded that we have to choke it out. We cannot feed it anymore. And we have to start speaking the truth consistently. And it will be defeated. And I've seen lie after lie in my life defeated. So do it, guys.
What is the actual time? Because that clock's always fast.
22.
11:22.
It is.
So you're not allowed to worship. And if you know the song, you're not allowed to sing. Your job is to receive. And here's what I want you to do. Again, if your body allows it, I want you to lay down. If the room allows it, lay down. And here's what I want. If you're somebody who struggles with any of the things I've listed, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, depression, discouragement, apathy, tortured thoughts, panic attacks, you're not allowed to get up and pray for anybody. If you're somebody who's found victory in that, or you've never struggled with it, during this song, you are allowed to get up and go lay your hands on someone and pray for them. Please, girls, lay your hands on girls, and guys, lay your hands on guys. I appreciate that. I don't see anybody laying down. Katie, you have the perfect capability to lay on that ground. If your body allows it, Jaden, so do you. If your body allows it, Daniel, you do too. You can lay in the aisles. Lay down. Your job is to receive. We're vulnerable before Him. There's peace over you, and His love is over you. There is peace over you, and His love is over you. Lord, we thank you for what you've been teaching us about what we would say against ourselves or think against ourselves, and we bow the knee and say, Daddy, you know best. I'm going to believe you. I believe what you say, Lord. I believe what you say about me, God. I believe you. And I ask, God, that you would help us. We're mere men. We don't know how to do it. For all of us struggling and not knowing how to get free, we don't know how, God. Help us. Help us, Daddy. You know best. Daddy could fix it. Daddy would know what to do. And so we yield to you, Daddy. Help us to fight on. Lord, the comfort you've given me, the freedom you've brought to me, over all those things I went through, the 7 I've listed over and over, freely you've given to me, freely I give to this room right now, God. The strength to press on, the strength to rejoice in the trial, the strength to not understand but still love my Daddy, the strength to believe your promises, and the strength to go deep so you can heal me. What you've given to me, God, I freely give out, God, for every person struggling with anxiety, depression, panic attacks, suicidal thoughts, discouragement, apathy. I break it in Jesus' name. I cut it off from the roots. And I ask, Lord, that your power would be present to heal. That he who the Son sets free would be free indeed. And I release freedom over this room, God. I release freedom over this room from bondage, God. I release freedom over this room from chains, God. And I just place inside of every one of you, you are worth getting free. You are worth getting free. Do whatever it takes to get free. Your family wants you free. God wants you free. You are worth it. You are worth it. Thanks for being with us, God. Let's go get our little babies.